lab, is one of the things that happens that it's given some kind of a number?
It is.
Okay. And the packaging that it's in will be labeled with that number?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily? So let me start by showing you again Exhibit 270, which the third item on that page refers to blue gum, right?
Correct.
Okay. And take that one back. Does this appear to be the packaging that I'll give you both of these. You can put them together. Does that appear to be both the packaging that particular item was contained in when received by your lab, as well as what the actual item looked like at the lab?
Yes.
Okay. And do those photos appear to be accurate photographs depicting that particular evidence?
It does.
I'd offer these as the next exhibit, Chairman.
No objection.
So 271A is just the envelope, right?
Correct.
Okay. And that's described here as blue-colored gum, Play-Doh type?
Correct.
Okay. And then 271B that's the item itself, right?
Yes.
Okay. And this, would you agree with me that that is the same item that's referred to in as the third item listed on Exhibit 270, the evidence submission form?
It is.
Okay. And it's the same item for which a special request was made for prints and DNA?
Yes.
Do you know whether your laboratory ever conducted DNA testing on that blue gum?
It did not.
Now, you told us that let's turn to this towel. That was a towel that you understood to have been found near the body of Odin Lloyd, right?
Correct.
Okay. And you examined the towel?
I did.
Okay. And you told us that one of the things you found on that towel was a hair, right?
Yes.
Okay. And am I correct that it was a human hair?
Yes.
And it was a human hair, light to medium brown in color,
Correct.
measuring approximately 3/8 of an inch,
Correct.
with a root,
Correct.
and with follicular, is that the word?
Follicular.
Follicular tissue attached.
Correct.
Can you explain to the jury, please, what is follicular tissue?
So when a hair is removed from any part of the body, as it is removed, sometimes skin and cells from the area of where it's removed is attached to the actual root, and this is what we would test.
And what is the root as it refers to a hair?
It's the area that attaches to the skin or the scalp, the shaft that the hair is attached with.
Okay. And this hair, this human hair that was light to medium brown with a root and follicular tissue attached, it was a curly hair, right?
May I refer?
Please. Let me see if I can help you by showing you something. Sorry, Mr. McCall. Showing you a document, Ms. Hernandez. Is that the worksheet that you prepared based upon your examination of this particular hair?
It was a worksheet that was filled out during my exam of it, yes,
Okay, filled out by whom?
by myself.
Okay. And does that document help refresh your recollection as to whether this human hair with a root and follicular tissue that was found on the towel was curly?
It does.
And was it curly?
It's marked off as curly, yes.
Now, as a experienced forensic scientist, can you tell us what mitochondrial DNA testing is?
Mitochondrial DNA testing is testing of a hair that does not have a root, so you would test the shaft of the hair for a DNA profile.
So, mitochondrial DNA testing can be performed on all hairs, right?
Correct, as long as there's enough to be tested. It has to be a certain length, I believe,
What has to be a certain length?
the hair.
Okay. And from your experience, you're aware that 3/8 of an inch is long enough to perform mitochondrial DNA testing, right?
I believe so.
Okay. Now, and mitochondrial, is that, why don't you spell that for the jury and the court reporter, please?
Mitochondrial, I believe.
Okay. So that's a different kind of DNA testing than the regular DNA testing that your laboratory does, right?
Correct.
Okay. And in fact, mitochondrial DNA testing of hair is a kind of testing that your laboratory doesn't even do, right?
Correct.
Okay. So when you want to perform mitochondrial DNA testing, by you I mean your laboratory or the investigators or the state police or the North Attleboro police or the prosecutors, if any of you want to perform mitochondrial DNA testing on a hair, that has to be sent out to an outside laboratory, right?
It does.
Okay, and that happens from time to time, right?
It does.
Okay. So, in this case, you recovered a hair, a curly human hair, on a towel found within feet of the decedent, right?
Correct.
Okay. Was that hair ever sent out for mitochondrial DNA testing?
I have no knowledge of that.
Whose call would it have been to send that hair out for mitochondrial DNA testing?
In this particular case, the hair had a follicular tissue, so it would not have been sent out for mitochondrial. We would have first tried to do regular DNA in our lab.
But it could have been sent out for mitochondrial DNA testing, right?
It could have.
Okay. And whose call was that?
Can you repeat that?
Who decided not to send it out for mitochondrial DNA testing?
Our case management unit would have all of the samples that are prepared for DNA testing, and in conjunction with attorneys and investigators, those items are picked to be run for DNA.
So you're telling us it's kind of a group decision, is that right?
It is.
Okay. Now, you told us that on February 7th of 2014, you obtained a DNA sample from my client, Aaron Hernandez, right?
I did.
Okay. And specifically, you obtained a sample of his saliva, right?
I obtained a sample of his inner cheek cells along with the saliva.
Okay. And is it fair to say that a person's inner cheek cells and saliva are chock full of their DNA?
The cells are what we obtain the DNA profile from.
Okay. And the cells are chock full of DNA, right?
They are.
And by the way, saliva contains DNA too, right?
It contains the cells that have the DNA. The saliva itself, unless the cells are broken open, generally won't have it.
If somebody spit on the ground, okay, would that substance contain DNA?
If it had the cells, yes.
And in your experience, it contains cells, right?
Yes.
Now, this DNA sample that you obtained from Aaron Hernandez, he provided that sample to you voluntarily, didn't he?
He did.
Show your document. And in fact, you had him sign a form documenting his voluntary submission of a DNA sample.
I
to
did.
you, right?
Yes.
And is that the form?
This is the form, yes.
That's a copy of the form. And he signed it, and you signed it, right?
I did.
And I signed it.
You did.
Okay. I'd offer this as the next exhibit.
Who's 72?
And I signed it because I was there to watch you do this, right?
To witness, yes.
Okay. So this is exhibit 272. So it says at the top, voluntary submission of DNA saliva sample for analysis, right?
Correct.
Okay. And that's one. Let me just do it this way. Let's see. I can't get the whole thing on the screen. Could you please, Ms. Hernandez, just read that exhibit to the jury?
On this date, and it was filled in with 2/7/14, I, and then Aaron Hernandez was filled in, voluntarily provide the Massachusetts, that was added in, Massachusetts State Police with the DNA saliva sample. I understand that it is possible that a judge could issue an order compelling the production of this sample or could deny the motion for an order. However, I waive my right to have a hearing before a judge to object to the production of the sample and provide the sample voluntarily, knowingly, and intelligently.
Thanks. Now, finally, Ms. Hernandez, let me ask you about the testing that you did on the items of Mr. Lloyd's clothing. Remember that testimony?
Yes.
Okay. And you told us you did what's called Grice testing, right?
Correct.
Okay, and why don't you spell that one for the jury, please?
I believe it's G-R-E-I-S-S.
Okay. And you also did a different kind of testing for lead and copper residue, is that right?
Correct.
Okay. Now, am I correct that one of the things that this testing is designed to figure out is what's called the muzzle to target distance?
Correct.
Okay. And the muzzle is the tip of the gun, right?
Correct.
Okay. And the target is whatever the projectile or bullet hit, right?
Correct.
Okay. So the muzzle to target distance is the distance between the gun and the target.
Correct.
Okay. Now, in this case, am I correct that you were unable to determine the muzzle to target distance based on your testing?
Can you repeat?
You were unable to determine the muzzle to target distance in this case, weren't you?
I was able to determine that it was within the muzzle to target distance.
Right. So whatever it was within the muzzle to target distance because you found residue.
Correct.
Okay. But you don't know what the muzzle to target distance in this case was, right?
On average in...
I didn't ask you about average. I asked you about this case, Ms. Menendez. In this case, would you agree with me that you were unable to determine the muzzle to target distance in this case?
I was able to determine that it was within. So I was able to determine, yes.
It was within the muzzle to target distance, right?
Correct.
But you don't know what the muzzle to target distance in this case was, right?
Without test firings, I don't know what the exact distance would be as far as the limits that the Grice test or the lead and copper would be found. So we have a general, we go based on past case history and exam that it was found to be within that distance.
But as you just acknowledged, without test firing a gun, you don't know what the actual muzzle to target distance is, right?
Not of each exact hole. It was just within. It was not, a distance wasn't determined for each hole.
That's with respect to each and every one of the holes, right?
Correct.
And whatever the distance was, that testing doesn't tell you anything about who fired the gun, does it?
It does not.
Thank you, Ms. Menendez.
Is there something that would have assisted you in determining the actual muzzle to target distance?
If we had the weapon and we performed standard test firings and generated profiles of the different distances for the Grice, I would have then been able to compare them and given an estimate of what the distance actually was.
So without the gun, you can't make an exact finding, is that right?
Nope, I can only be general and say within the muzzle to target, which is 4 to 5 feet.
So do you know where the gun is?
I do not.
And in terms of making that determination, it would be the gun that was used for that particular crime, is that right?
The gun that was used and similar ammunition.
And with regard to Mr. Sultan asking you about saliva, does saliva actually have any DNA?
It's the cells that are contained in the saliva that has the DNA.
Right. So when you go to collect, to do a buccal swab, you're not interested in just getting saliva, is that true?
You're interested in getting saliva because it helps transport the cells, which actually have the DNA.
But pure saliva, so if you just recovered saliva, you wouldn't actually have any cells. Pure saliva has no cells for the purpose of doing DNA testing.
If the cells are loose, they may be in the saliva.
Right, and that's why you use the swab to rub, to generate sloughing off the cells, and then obviously with the saliva, it adheres to the swab.
Correct.
Okay. And do you know whether something, Mr. Sultan asked about Mr. Hernandez voluntary consent, do you know whether there was a filing that was made to Mr. Hernandez prior to him signing this?
I believe there was.
Mr. Sultan hadn't called you up and said, come on down and take Mr.
Objection.
Objection sustained. Question sorted, stricken, disregarded.
Mr. Sultan asked you about certain rush items. Is that, do you remember that?
I do.
Okay. And is it unusual in a homicide to have certain items that are identified early in the investigation that investigators want to find out if they have any bearing on the case?
It's very common.
Okay. And so the idea that things, that your lab might get noticed or notified about rushing a particular item, how often does that happen in homicide cases?
Most often unsolved or investigating homicides, we probably 75% of the time are performing rushes on certain pieces of evidence.
And there's a reason why you conducted swabs of the shell casings in this case?
There was.
Okay. And what was that reason?
According to our protocols, certain pieces of evidence go through a certain route in the lab. They first start with crime scene services, who would print them. The printing process does not disturb the DNA. I would then swab that evidence to remove the DNA, and then it goes to our ballistics unit. If it went to the ballistics unit first, they could sometimes compromise the DNA, so it's removed beforehand.
And that's part of your protocol to swab spent shell casings in an effort to recover DNA from them.
It is.
And with regard to Mr. Sultan's questions about having conversations with people in the course of an investigation about items to test or not to test, is that unusual?
It's not.
Okay. Do you work as part of a team to assist the investigators as they're gathering information or finding evidence and making decisions about whether it should be tested or should not be tested?
I do.
Okay. Is that unusual in any way?
It is not.
Okay. Thank you. Nothing further?
Very briefly. We're going to exhibit. You testified a minute ago about swabbing shell casings, right?
Correct.
And you swabbed a total of 6 shell casings, right?
I did.
Okay. And with respect to the 6th shell casing that you swabbed, were you aware when you swabbed it that it had been found attached to the blue gum that we talked about a little bit earlier this afternoon?
I was aware that one of them on the second exam of the single shell casing was attached to gum, yes.
Showing you Exhibit 135. Had you seen that photograph or similar photographs depicting that shell casing attached to that gum?
I have.
Okay. Had you seen that when you, at the time that you swabbed the casing?
I had not.
And would it be relevant to you as a forensic scientist in swabbing a piece of evidence like a shell casing that had been attached to a piece of blue chewing gum at the time it was found?
I had the knowledge that it was attached. I just hadn't seen the photograph.
Would that be relevant to you as a forensic scientist?
Could be.
Okay, and why would that be relevant to you as a forensic scientist?
I would have known what I had called as green debris. I would have known what it was.
And was it relevant in terms of the significance of whatever you might find on that shell casing?
It could be relevant.
How could it be relevant?
That anything on the, in this case, the blue debris could have been on the casing from the blue debris.
Thank you, ma'am. No further questions.
Jimmy? Jim?
Oh, just a moment, Your Honor, if I could, I'm sorry. Your Honor, could we just approach for a moment?
We're going to take what hopefully will be a pretty short 5-minute or so recess. Please talk about this.
Put all rise.
Could you just read the question and answer?
And do you know whether something, Mr. Sullivan asked about Mr. Hernandez voluntarily consenting. Do you know whether there was a filing that was made to Mr. Hernandez prior to him signing this?
Sending a paper that one intends to file. So I will simply instruct the jury that there was no, that there was no filing.
Well, see, I would respectfully disagree, Your Honor.
Well, I will let you do, you know, if you want to do some redirect, ask her, do you understand that they were sent a document of an anticipated filing, but an actual filing had not occurred. If you're sending a document, a filing happens when something is filed in a court, and there's a difference between service and filing, and there's a difference between giving an attorney notice. So if that question was filing.
Well, the objection was, Your Honor, it was the court filing, and I said I didn't say that because in my mind I filed with them. It was a proposed.
Do you have any
order.
definition of filing, case, dictionary, that filing, that the word filing
I filed
includes,
with them.
right, and do you have anything that indicates that when you send something to a lawyer, that that's a filing as opposed to a service or something else?
This was
Filing.
a motion, Your Honor, to compel him to give a DNA sample.
Right.
I didn't file it with the court, and they suggested at the sidebar I said that. I didn't, now that we've heard the record. I filed it with him, I sent it to them, and I essentially said, either he's going to agree or we are going to have this hearing in court. They agreed. So his questions, I thought, were misleading in the sense he was suggesting there was a voluntary occasion that he wanted to give the DNA. That wasn't true. So when I asked the question, I said, did you understand there was a filing? It was filed on him, not in the court. So I don't think it's misleading to the jury in the manner in which it was presented. And it's actually the opposite of what he suggested at the sidebar. So I don't think any further comment should be directed to the jury about their understanding. I think they understand now it wasn't truly voluntary.
Well, respectfully, Your Honor, I think it was truly voluntary, and I do think the jury has now been left with a misleading impression that there was some filing, and I don't care whether it's corrected by Mr. McCauley or by Your Honor, but I think the jury needs to be informed that there, in fact, was no filing made before Mr. Hernandez voluntarily submitted his DNA sample. That is the reality of what happened.
And Your Honor, then I would just ask if I could be permitted to ask the question in a way that would clear it up as opposed to the court. Because I just think the jury...
Well, if this witness is aware, the court can certainly take judicial notice of the docket or whatever. But if this witness is aware that there was no filing, I will certainly allow you to do it by way of a redirect.
Thank you.
As long as, Your Honor, that's the thrust of the question, that there was no filing as opposed to some...
Well, but I think it is fair. I think what the Commonwealth was trying to do was also fair. I think it's fair to point out that prior to any voluntary agreement, was this witness aware that the Commonwealth put the defendant on notice that it intended to file for a...
Absolutely, Your Honor. I think that's all. I just want the whole picture to be clear.
Right.
That's fine.
So as long as I'm allowing the Commonwealth to correct what I think is a misnomer of the word filing, I'm allowing the Commonwealth to correct that there had been no filing, but that prior to any voluntary agreement, the Commonwealth had given notice to the defendant and it anticipated making a filing for a court ruling.
That's
We
fine.
can bring the jurors back. You otherwise have finished, Mr. Sultan, with this
Yes, Your Honor.
witness. Thank you.
is in session. Be seated, please.
Mr. McCauley?
Thank you, Ron. I just want to go back to a question I had asked you before. Prior to you meeting with the defendant to collect his DNA, were you aware of the Commonwealth having had provided materials to the defense indicating its intention to collect DNA? If he didn't consent?
I was aware, yes.
Okay. Nothing further. Thank you.
Are you aware, ma'am, that there never was an actual filing made in court asking a judge to order that Mr. Hernandez's DNA be taken?
I'm aware.
And in the absence of such an order, Mr. Hernandez voluntarily agreed to provide that sample, correct?
I believe so.
Thank you. You may step down.
And if I could call our next witness, Christina Hanley, please.
Right this way, ma'am. Please follow me. Please face the clerk and raise your right hand.
Okay, do you solemnly swear that the testimony about to give to this court in this jury will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
There you are. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon.
State your full name, please.
It's Christina Hanley.
And how do you spell your first name?
First name is Christina.
And your last name, please.
Last name is Hanley.
Do you work?
I work at the Massachusetts State Police Crime Laboratory.
And how long have you worked there?
I have been there for about 6.5 years.
What is your current assignment?
I am currently a forensic scientist in the Trace, Arson, and Explosives Unit.
And how long have you been a forensic scientist in that unit?
For about 4 years, I believe.
Excuse me. Could you just describe what you do as a forensic scientist in that unit?
Sure. So I am responsible for documenting, analyzing, and comparing trace evidence that includes, but is not limited to, fibers, paint, and glass. And I also perform serial number restorations on firearms.
And what type of background do you have in terms of your educational background prior to working for the State Police Lab?
I have my Bachelor of Science, the major in chemistry, and a concentration in forensics from Merrimack College.
And when you, just with regards to trace evidence, could you just give us an idea of what is trace?
Trace evidence, it includes the analysis and comparison of items such as fibers, paint, glass, tape, just miscellaneous small items like that.
Okay. Have you, how many items have you been involved in essentially examining or testing in the course of your time at the State Police Lab?
Specifically in trace, I've probably completed hundreds of cases.
Okay. I would like to direct your attention to a matter involving the homicide of Odin Lloyd. At some point, were you requested to do some trace comparisons in this case?
Yes, I was.
And just if you would tell us, was there an item that was first sent to you for your analysis?
Yes.
Okay, and what was that item?
Well, I was sent a total of 4 items, which were item 3-7, item 3-8, item 3-9, and item 29-1.1.
Let me, at some point in time, did you, were you sent an item, certain materials from a projectile?
Yes, I was.
And I'm just going to, if I could approach her on. And I'm just going to show you what was marked 265B. Just ask if you recognize anything in this photograph.
Portions of it
Okay,
appear.
which portions do you recognize?
The fibrous material appears similar to the fibrous material that I received.
Okay. Now, at some point in time, when you say you received certain items in this case, how do those fibrous material, did you receive some fibers?
Yes, I did.
Okay, and how did those fibers come to you?
They were transferred to my laboratory from Sherry Menendez.
Okay, and when those items were transferred to your lab, just tell us, what did you initially do with, specifically with regard to a question fiber?
So when I received the question fibers, which were item 29-1.1, I made general observations. I noted that the item consisted of 2 pieces of blue, green, and off-white woven fabric. I also noted 1 piece of black and white knit fabric, and I also noticed a group of blue fiber bundles.
Okay. And these fibers, when you first saw them, how were they together or were they separated?
Portions of them were separated, portions were kind of adhered to each other.
Okay. And could you just tell us, what do you mean when you say a fiber bundle? What is that?
Fiber bundle is just a kind of like a cluster of several individual fibers.
In this item, when you first made observations, how were you observing it? Is that just with your eyes, or were you using some type of magnification?
I did examine it at first just with the naked eye, made general observations, and then I did examine it microscopically.
Okay. And tell us, how do you go about examining it microscopically?
Sure. Starting with the 2 blue, green, and off-white woven pieces of fabric, I examined it. I sampled, I believe it was 4 fiber bundles from those pieces of woven fabric that I felt were representative of those pieces, and I sampled portions of those fiber bundles for microscopic examination, where I made observations such as color, microscopic appearance, optical properties. Once I had finished that, I went back to the fiber bundles that I had selected, and I randomly selected some several additional individual fibers, and I did some additional microscopic examination to those, making the same observations: color, microscopic appearance, optical properties of those samples. And then from there, I sampled additional samples for instrumental analysis. And I did that same type of examination and analysis for the black and white knit fabric that was there, and also the group of blue fiber bundles that were there.
Okay. So in addition to looking at these fibers microscopically, you indicate there's other instruments you use?
Correct.
And just tell us about that.
Sure. So portions were sampled for instrumental analysis on a FTIR, which is known as a Fourier transform infrared spectrometer. And some were sampled for additional instrumental analysis on a UV-Vis microspectrophotometer.
Okay. And what does that allow you to see using those instruments?
So the FTIR, basically it produces a graphical representation of the sample's composition, and the microspectrophotometer that I mentioned, it basically produces a graphical representation of the sample's color components.
Okay. Okay, approach your own. And I'm just going to show you these photographs and ask you if you recognize them.
Yes, I do.
Okay. This one.
Yes, I do.
Okay. What do you recognize this first one to be?
I recognize it as item 29-1.1 from laboratory number 13-11925.
Okay. Was this the item that Sherry Hernandez had sent to you for analysis?
Yes, it was.
Okay. How about this second photograph? Do you recognize that?
Yes.
And what do you recognize this to be?
Also from item 29-1.1.
Okay. And this was that fibers that you analyzed, is that true?
Correct.
I'd offer this as an
Objection.
Mark's next exhibit.
It's 73A and B.
I could publish this. And I'm putting this item now, 273A, on the overhead. You see that all right?
Yes.
Could you just describe for the jury what is shown in this photograph?
So in this photograph, it is item 29-1.1. And what you can see is the blue, green, and off-white woven fabric, and next to it a group of blue fiber bundles.
Okay. And is there a designation of A, B, and C?
Yes, so I assigned each portion a letter just for record keeping for myself. So A was the blue fiber bundles, B I was the blue, green, and off-white woven fabric, And then there's a third portion which I labeled C, which is difficult to see in this photo. It's on the opposite side of B, but that was the black and white knit fabric.
Okay. Let me show you this, what we've now marked 273B. What does this photo show?
This is also item 29-1.1, and this is what I had marked as C, which was the black and white knit fabric.
So that would be that area that you indicated here that was kind of hard to see. You can see that now.
Correct.
Amplified or magnified.
Yes, correct.
Now, at some point after having made examinations of those fibers, did you have an occasion to review and examine certain articles of clothing that had also been sent to you by Sherry Menendez?
Yes, I did.
Okay, and just describe what articles of clothing were sent to you.
So I received item 3-7, which was a blue hooded sweatshirt. I also received item 3-8, which was a multicolored plaid short sleeve shirt. And I received item 3-9, which was a gray tank top.
And then I'll show you what's been marked 269A and 268A. Do you recognize what's depicted in those photographs?
Yes, I do.
Okay, and what do you recognize those items to be?
I recognize that as item, the blue hooded sweatshirt, item 3-7.
Okay, and how about this item here?
I recognize it as item 3-8, the multicolored plaid short sleeve shirt.
You also indicated it was a tank top that you had examined.
Correct.
And at some point, just in terms of your examination, do you take certain cuttings from clothing to make comparisons?
Yes, I do.
Did you do that in this case?
Yes.
And where did you take cuttings from?
So with item 3-7, the blue hooded sweatshirt, a cutting or fabric standard was taken from the back of the sweatshirt. From item 3-8, the multicolored plaid short sleeve shirt, a cutting for a fabric standard was taken from the back also. And the last item, item 3-9, the gray tank top, there was a cutting taken from the front as well as the back of the tank top.
I'm just going to show you 3 additional photographs and ask you if you recognize what's depicted in these photographs.
Yes, I do. Yes. Yes.
Okay, what do you recognize these 3 photographs to depict?
I recognize them as the fabric standards that I took from all 3 clothing items.
Did you take these photographs?
Yes, I did.
Your Honor, I'd offer this as the next exhibit.
Okay.
And knock his next exhibit.
274A through C.
If I could publish these. So, ma'am, I'm going to show you what has now been marked 274A. This was the photograph you'd taken of certain materials, is that true?
Yes.
And where did this material come from?
This came from the blue hooded sweatshirt.
Show you now what's been marked 274B. Recognize this.
Yes, I do.
What do you recognize this to be?
As the fabric standard that I took from the multicolored plaid short sleeve shirt.
Lastly, 274C. Recognize this.
Yes, I do.
What do you recognize this to be?
This is one of the fabric standards that was taken from the gray tank top.
Now, once these cuttings have been made, what did you do with them?
Once I took a fabric standard from a clothing item, I examined the fabric standard, and I took representative samples from that fabric standard. So I took some fiber bundles, and I sampled some for microscopic examination. And like I said earlier, I made observations such as color, microscopic appearance, optical properties. I also went back again. I randomly selected several individual fibers, did some additional microscopic examination on those, and then I went back, took some more samples from those individual fibers, and I ran them for instrumental analysis.
Okay. And with regard to comparisons, did you compare those, or just what were your findings with regard to any comparisons that you made with the questioned items that had been sent to you?
I did do a comparison, and what I had concluded was that the examined portions of the blue, green, and off-white woven fabric from the spent projectile, they were found to be consistent in color, fiber type, microscopic appearance, and instrumental properties with the examined portions of the multicolored plaid short sleeve shirt. I also noted that the black and white knit fabric from the spent projectile was found to be consistent in color, fiber types, microscopic appearance, and instrumental properties with the examined portions of the gray tank top. And then lastly, I noted that the group of blue fiber bundles from the spent projectile were found to be consistent in color, fiber types, microscopic appearance, and instrumental properties with the blue hooded sweatshirt.
have nothing further. Thank you, ma'am.
I don't have any questions for Mr. Leonard.
Sit down.
Thank you.
I don't know if we could call John Biello, please.
Please face the clerk and raise your right hand.
Sir, do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give to this court and this jury will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Have a seat, sir.
Thank you.
Mayor, Your Honor. Sir, would you state your full name?
John Biello, B-I-E-L-L-O.
And where do you work, sir?
I'm employed at the Massachusetts State Police Crime Laboratory.
How long have you worked there?
I've been employed there for 15 years.
And how are you currently assigned?
I'm assigned to the Trace Arson and Explosives Unit.
And how long have you been in that unit?
Just about 10 years.
What do you do in the Trace Arson and Explosive Unit?
My assignments there are, I look for any kind of ignitable liquids in fire cases, look for any explosive residue in explosive cases, and any gunshot primer residue in gun cases.
Okay. Can you tell us, prior to working for the state police, can you tell us about your educational background?
Yes, I have a Bachelor's of Science in Chemistry from Stonehill College.
Okay. And with regard to, you mentioned some of the things you do at the Trace Arson Explosive Unit. You mentioned gunshot powder residue?
Correct.
Okay, just tell us a little bit about that. What is that?
The gunshot primer residue is located in the back of the ammunition in the primer cup. So when the firing pin hits that primer cup, it creates initial explosion, which ignites the propellant, which ejects the bullet. So when you have a release of the gas out of all the openings of the weapon, it'll start to quickly cool and form particles. When you have a particle that's formed that contains three elements, lead, antimony, and barium, and has a shape that tends to be rounded in nature, that's a gunshot primer residue particle.
Okay. And when you describe these particles, how large or small are these particles that, just if you start with that, how large or small are they?
The particles range from anywhere from a half a micron up to 50, sometimes even 100 microns.
Okay. And what is a micron?
A micron, if you think of a hair, tends to range from 50 to 100 microns, so they tend to be smaller than a hair. They're microscopic. You can't see them with the naked eye.
Okay. And so with regard to gunshot powder residue testing, how is a test like that conducted?
We perform that analysis using a scanning electron microscope, and it's coupled to energy dispersive spectroscopy.
Okay. And the electron microscope, just describe what that is.
The electron microscope, it's a high-powered microscope that uses an electron beam instead of light to reflect an image. So what that instrument does is it'll scan the stubs that we are given. It'll take pictures of any of the particles that are on that stub, and at the same time it'll analyze its elemental composition of what that particle is made up of.
Okay. And how are these particles that you're describing, how would they be gathered?
The particles are gathered using a collection stub. It's a sticky surface about the size of a dime head, and that surface is applied to areas of interest, whether it be hands or clothing or vehicles, and those stubs are what collect those particles.
Okay. You know, there's certain protocols that are followed when a test such as a gunshot powder residue test is conducted.
Yes.
Okay, and what are those protocols?
We have protocols for the analysis of the gunshot primer residue, and we also follow the ASTM guideline for the analysis of gunshot primer residue.
Okay, and what guidelines are those, ASTM?
The ASTM is a organization for American Standards of Testing and Materials.
Okay, and those protocols, those standards, with regard to how the test is conducted, you've indicated there's some stubs that are used?
Correct.
And what is done with the stubs?
The stubs are submitted to my unit for analysis, and the analysis takes place using that scanning electron microscope.
Okay. So these stubs, in the initial phase, they're used to attempt to collect items related to a gunshot powder residue?
Correct.
Okay. And how is the stub used to do that?
The stub is used, the process, it's a dabbing process. It's got a sticky surface, so it'll be dabbed on the areas of interest looking to collect those powder residues.
Okay. And when a gunshot or a gun is fired, there's a gunshot, just describe the types of particles in terms of how are the particles emitted from the gun.
So when there's an initial explosion, there's a gas that's released from all the openings of the weapon, the front, the sides, and the rear. When that gas hits the air, it's going to quickly start to cool and start to come back to a solid phase. And when those gas comes back to the solid phase, it'll start to form particles. And when you have a particle that has the three elements of lead, antimony, and barium, that's a gunshot primer residue particle.
Okay. And does it require all three of these particles to come together for a particular finding of a gunshot powder residue?
Yes, all three must be present.
Okay. Now, at some point, did you become involved in testing certain items related to a homicide investigation of Odin Lloyd?
Yes.
Okay. And approximately how many items were sent to you for examination?
Your Honor, may I just refer to my notes for the total? Thank you. Received a total of 4 items, and some of those items had multiple stubs submitted for them.
Okay. I'd just like to direct your attention to June 21st. Did you receive, June 21st, 2013, did you receive an item identified as 2-1.1?
Yes.
Okay, and did that have a particular labeling to it?
Yes, I received 2 stubs for that item. One was labeled as the label side of the towel, and the other one was labeled as the non-label side of the towel.
Okay. And with regard to what you receive, you don't receive the towel itself. Is that true?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, with these stubs, once you receive them, just tell us what you do.
Once I receive the stubs, I take them into my custody, and I'll start to take notes on those items, what they were labeled, and things of that nature. Those stubs are then placed into our scanning electron microscope with a negative and positive control. The negative control is to ensure that there's no contamination or that the control's blank, and the positive control has known gunshot primer residue on it, and that's to ensure that the instrument functioned properly.
Okay. And with regards to the identification of potential gunshot powder residues, are there certain time requirements to effectively capture these particles?
Time is a factor when it comes to the sampling of hands. After 4 hours, we tend not to be able to recover the primer residue particles from the hands.
Okay. What about in other areas, like on items, if a gun has been fired and on other items, are there other things that would impact the ability to recover them?
Yes, the particles are microscopic, so they're very light, so any kind of friction, rubbing can remove those particles from one item to another. Any kind of water or cleaning solvents can remove those particles as well. And the fact that when the gun's fired, there's no way to quantify how much of those 3 component particles are going to be formed from the weapon when it's fired.
Okay. So does the absence of a positive finding mean that a gun was not fired?
No.
Okay. Now, back to item 2-1.1, were those stubs relating to a white towel?
Yes.
Okay. And just tell us, once you have those stubs, how do you go about testing them? Do you have a certain equipment to make that determination?
Correct. Those stubs are placed into our scanning electron microscope and for the process to detect any gunshot primer residue.
Okay. But just in terms of how they're detected, do you then, is there some program run on it? And then do you also go and visually try and identify the three items of lead, antimony, and barium?
Yes. The system is automated, so it'll scan the whole area of that stub, detecting any particles that basically are giving off light. Once the analysis is complete, I will sit down at the instrument and I will visually look at all the particles and determine if they're gunshot primer residue particles or not.
Okay. And when you examined, at some point you examined the stubs related to the white towel?
Correct.
And what findings did you make?
Those are negative for gunshot primer residue.
Okay. And did you, on June 19th, 2013, were you also, item 18-1, was that delivered to you?
Yes.
And just, if you would, describe what item 18-1 you received.
There was 4 of those collection stubs taken from a Nissan Altima.
Okay. And the 4 stubs related to a collection kit?
Yes.
Did you conduct similar GSR testing on those?
Yes.
And what, if any, finding did you make?
That all 4 of those stubs were negative for gunshot primer residue.
Now, you indicated some of the things that would could have a impact on these particles, the recovery of these particles. You've indicated time, some cleaners or water. What effect, if any, would a vacuuming have on these types of particles?
Those particles, if they're vacuumed, could be removed from those surfaces into the vacuum.
Okay. Now, the Nissan Altima, those 4 stubs, were they in separate compartments, meaning for different areas of the vehicle?
Yes.
Okay. And what areas were those?
Stub A was listed as coming from the steering wheel, the shift knob, the driver door handle, and seat. Second stub was labeled as the rear driver's side interior handle and seat. Third stub was labeled coming from the front passenger side interior handle and seat. And the 4th stub was listed as the rear passenger side interior handle and seat.
Okay. And the results of all that testing was all negative?
Correct.
Did you also examine or have delivered on June 22nd, 2013, a GSR kit related to item 30-10 described as impressions on the underside of mattress, basement, bedroom?
Yes.
And did you conduct similar GSR testing on those stubs?
Yes.
And your results?
That was negative for gunshot primer residue.
Now, sir, additionally, on June 27th, 2013, did you also receive from Sherry Hernandez a gunshot powder residue collection kit relating to item 30-7.1 described as shirt?
Yes.
And more specifically, the left and the right cuffs/sleeves?
Correct.
And did you, again, perform the same examination of these items as you've already described?
Yes.
And your finding with regard to that item, sir?
Those were negative for gunshot primer residue.
Okay. If I could have a moment, Your Honor. Nothing further. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Biella.
Good afternoon, sir.
So am I correct, based on your direct examination, that you examined a total of 9 stubs from various items of evidence for the presence of gunshot residue?
Let me just count them up, make sure. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Counting right.
8. 8 total.
Well, there were 2 from the towel. Let's just go through them, the ones you talked about on direct, okay?
Okay.
Make sure that we're all counting correctly. 2 from the towel, right?
Correct.
4 from the Altima, right?
Correct.
So that's 2 plus 4 is 6, right?
Correct.
1 from the underside of the mattress is 7,
Correct.
right? 1 from the sweatshirt, right? That's 8.
That's the only one from the sweatshirt. They stubbed the left and the right cuffs
Okay.
on one stub.
All right, just 1 stub.
Correct.
Is that right? Okay. So it's 8.
8.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay. So you tested a total of 8 stubs for the presence of gunshot residue.
Correct.
Okay. And all of your testing was negative, right?
Correct.
Meaning no gunshot residue found, right?
Correct.
And you told us on direct examination that a negative result basically doesn't mean anything, right?
A negative result just means that the stubs that were submitted to me did not have any gunshot primer residue on them.
So you can't draw any conclusion one way or the other than it's not there, right?
Correct.
Thank you, sir.
Nothing further.
Your Honor, Todd Gerard, please.
Raise your right hand.
Sir, do you solemnly swear that the testimony about to give to this court, Mr. Chair, will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Have a seat, sir.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
May I inquire, Your Honor?
May.
Thank you. Sir, state your name, please.
Todd R. Gerard,
And spell that last name, please.
G-I-R-O-U-A-R-D.
And the first name is common spelling T-O-D-D.
Yes, that's correct.
What do you do for a living, sir?
I'm a trooper with the Massachusetts State Police,
And within which section of the state police do you work?
the Crime Scene Services section.
When did you first become a police officer?
In 1996,
And where did you work at that time?
the town of Paxton,
How long did you work for Paxton?
till the year 2000.
And in 2000, did you join a different police department?
I did.
Which department was that?
The Sterling Police Department,
And in 2005, did you join the state police?
I did.
During the time that you were working for the two towns, Paxton and Sterling, could you just describe for the jury, please, what your duties were for those particular towns?
I was a member of the Worcester County B&E Task Force, as well as the Worcester County Drug and Countercrime Task Force. I was responsible for responding to crime scenes throughout Worcester County and processing their crime scenes and submitting evidence to the state police.
When you joined the state police, what was your first job with the state police?
I was assigned to Northampton Barracks as a road trooper in field services.
How long did you end up working on the road?
Approximately a year.
And it was then that you joined crime scene services?
Yes, that's correct.
Do you have a bachelor's degree?
I do.
When did you first start working on the bachelor's degree?
In 1994,
And when did you finish it?
2009,
Where did you get your bachelor's?
Anna Maria College,
And what was the subject?
criminal justice.
With regards to this particular case, I first want to draw your attention to December 9th, 2014. On that particular day, did you go somewhere with Trooper Hollis Crowley of our office?
Yes, I did.
And where was it that you went?
Worcester County House of Correction in the town of West Boylston.
Excuse me, what did you do there that day?
I took photographs of an individual.
May I approach you? Show you what's previously marked, number 143, and ask if you recognize what that is.
I do.
What is that?
It's a photograph of Carlos Ortiz.
Is that the individual who's you worked with that day at Worcester County House of Correction?
Yes, that's correct.
I'll show you these two items and ask you to recognize what those are.
I do.
What are those?
Those are Mr. Ortiz's feet and a measuring device.
What kind of a measuring device were you using that day?
I'm not sure exactly the particular name of the measuring device, but it's commonly used at a shoe store.
Were you present when those pictures were actually taken?
I was.
Do those fairly and accurately represent the measurement of Mr. Ortiz's feet that day?
They do.
We could admit that.
Okay.
Next exhibit.
$275 A and B.
May I publish on?
Me.
We're showing you what has been marked 275A. As if you describe to the jury what we're looking at here.
Mr. Ortiz's right foot.
With regards to the particular device here, this metal object, who brought that to the measuring that day?
Trooper Crowley.
And with regards to where Mr. Ortiz's heel is placed within that device, do you know whether or not it was up against the back end of the device?
I do.
And was it?
It was.
Showing you 275B. Ask if you recognize what that is.
That is Mr. Ortiz's left foot.
And with regards to the measuring device that particular day, again, was Mr. Ortiz's heel up against the back of that?
It was.
Did you personally observe that?
I did.
Now, sir, with particular reference to your training in crime scene services, what training and experience do you have with regards to impression analysis?
I've been to 2 training courses, both one-week classes. One held by William Bodziak's Forensics. One was the detection, recovery, and comparison of footwear evidence. And that was in 2008. The second course I went to was tire tread and tire tread comparison class by Bodziak Forensics.
Specifically with regards to tire tread analysis, what is that?
It's basically the tread design on the outside of a tire.
And what is being analyzed there?
The physical size and shape, or tread design.
Have you yourself ever done any tire tread analyses?
I have.
How many have you done?
Approximately 15, maybe more.
Have you ever testified with regards to tire tread analysis?
I have not.
Specifically, with regards to a tire tread analysis, what are the characteristics that you look for in a tire tread?
Class characteristics and individual characteristics.
What's the difference between those two things?
Class characteristic is characteristics that are reproduced during the manufacturing stage of the tire. They include the physical size and tread design of that particular tire, and if any particular mold defects that might be in a mold.
With regards to the manufacturing specifications of a tire, is that one of the class characteristics?
Yes.
And what are those kinds of specifications that a tire has?
They have 5 ribs, multiple tread blocks throughout the circumference of the tire.
Do all common tires have 5 tread blocks?
No.
Okay. What exactly is a tread block?
Tread block is one design element on the circumference of the tire.
How do you determine one block from another on a tire?
They're separated by a groove.
And what are the other class characteristics of a tire?
Individual characteristics.
No, other than individual characteristics. What are the other things that you look for within class characteristics?
Grooves and sipes.
What's a groove?
A groove is essentially the larger, for lack of a better term, a cut in a tire. They're much larger and deeper than the sipes. The sipes are more of a shallow cut in a tire that is put into those tires by the manufacturer to add grip.
When you talk about a tire itself, is there something on the tire that sort of marks each piece of the tire as you go around in a circle?
There's wear bar indicators.
What are those?
Those are sunken in between the ribs of the tire. They're raised exactly 2/32 of an inch.
Where do you get that number? Where does that come from?
Comes from the manufacturer. When a tire is worn down, that's an indicator that you need to replace the tire.
Now, with regards to a tire impression, where do tire impressions come from?
They can be 3-dimensional or 2-dimensional.
How do they come into your hands? How do they get to an analyst?
Well, they're either submitted into through an evidence tech, which would be an intake case, or it could be a scene where I particularly went out to and collected that particular evidence.
With regards to 2-dimensional images, how do you translate a 2-dimensional image into an analysis of a 3-dimensional object?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Sure. If you get a picture of something, that's in 2 dimensions, right?
Correct.
How do you do an analysis of a picture as compared to a 3-dimensional object?
You have to calibrate the image.
Okay. And how do you do that?
There has to be a scale in the image. That digital image is brought into a particular type of software where you take a known measurement and you want to turn that image into a 1-to-1, so a true life-size image.
Now, as you go around a tire, does the tire have repeating patterns of the same characteristics on the class level?
It can.
And is that common?
Yes.
Do the manufacturers do something so that the patterns do not repeat on tires?
They do.
What is that?
They do a noise treatment on the tire, or pitch length.
What's the purpose of that?
It's to quiet the tire.
And then how does that show up in the actual markings on the tire?
They'll put a sequence of different shape and sizes of those particular tread blocks in all different sequences around the wheel. It's generally, the manufacturers put 3 different sizes of a particular shape of a tread block, and generally the way it quiets the tire is that a larger tread block will have a lower pitch and a smaller tread block will have a higher pitch, so they actually cancel each other out. So it's as those treads are making contact with the road and the air being pressed up inside of it.
Okay. When you first look to do either an exclusion or an inclusion of a particular tire, which characteristics do you first look at?
Class characteristics.
Okay? And with regards to class characteristics, are some more easily detected than others?
Yes.
What's the first one that you look at?
I look for the ribs and the tires.
Okay. Your Honor, we actually have a tire here. May I profit and show the jury what we're talking about from all of these different characteristics?
Objection.
And it's marked for identification. Mr. Bomber has been kind enough to allow me to put on this tire on this table if I could, Judge. And maybe we can just come down when you stand. Mr. Drummond. All right. Just what we have here has been marked Z for identification. You could, sir, could you just show the jury the class characteristics on this particular tire?
Well, if you look at one particular shape, tread block here, this elliptical shape right here, you'll see as you go along that rib, you'll see three different sizes. You have a large tread block, a medium tread block, and a small tread block. In that sequence, for each and every one of these particular shapes and sizes, within a certain sequence, and different sequences throughout the tire, which is determined by the engineer of the tire.
These markings here across the tire, what are those?
Rear bar indicators.
And do those continue throughout the tire?
In different sections.
Are they regular? In other words, they always occur at the same interval on every tire?
No.
And do they occur in the same interval within a tire? So they're always 16 inches apart, say?
No.
With regards to the sort of pieces across the tire, what are these called?
Ribs.
And the large grooves between them?
Those are grooves between the ribs.
And the smaller sort of indentations, what are those referred to as?
These would be sights right here. This area right here. So these smaller, shallow grooves are actually called sights. They don't extend all the way to the bottom of the block.
And when you're looking at the class characteristics of the tire, could you sort of start from the most obvious to the lowest detail of what is the class characteristic of the tire?
Yes.
So which is sort of the first thing you look at?
Well, it's a 5-rib tire. It's a very complex.
I'm sorry, sir. Could you repeat that?
A 5-rib tire.
Okay, go ahead.
In my opinion, it's a very complex tire. There's a lot of different tread blocks throughout each and every single rib.
And then with regards to the particular pattern of the tire, is that also considered to be a general class characteristic?
Yes.
I was going to ask you if you would really try to keep your voice up here away from
I will, Your Honor.
Now, this particular tire, can you tell just from the tire itself sort of which side of a car it would be on?
Yes.
You can't. How?
Oh, not the side of the car. This is the rear passenger.
But this could just as easily have been on any other part of a car.
Correct, but I have to be turned around.
If you just return it to stand, just stand, sir. With regards to this particular case, were you called upon to do tire pressure work on this case?
I was.
And what was the first time that you recall receiving some notification to do work on this case?
Sometime before August 1st,
Of what year?
2013.
Where were you working at that time?
Crime Scene Services in Sudbury.
And where did you go?
I went to Lakeville Crime Lab.
when you got there, what were you going to look at? Was there a particular car you were looking at?
There was
And what was that?
a 2006 Nissan Altima.
Do you remember which Nissan Altima? Do you remember the license plate of the car?
I don't.
May I approach you? I showed this photograph as previously embarked 120A. Ask if you recognize what that is.
Appears to be the 2006 Nissan Altima, color gray.
With regards to this particular case, is this the one that you went and looked at?
Yes, but at a different location.
The vehicle, when you got there, where was it?
It was in the bay.
What kind of a bay?
It was essentially a garage in the back of Crime Scene Services in Lakeville.
Okay. And what was the first thing that you did when you got there?
I photoed it.
Okay. Did you photo with particular reference to the tires?
I did.
Okay. Had somebody at that point given you a photograph of a tire impression?
Yes,
So before you photoed the car, did you see the tire impression?
I did.
Who did that? Who gave that to you?
Lieutenant Steve Bennett.
May I approach you? Let me see what you're showing. Show you what's previously been marked as an exhibit as 235A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, and J. Ask you to take a look at those. Do you recognize those photographs, sir?
I do.
What are those?
Those are photographs of a tire track impression.
Were these photographs given to you that day when you went to look at the car?
They were.
Specifically now, with regards to those photographs, were you able to tell anything with regards to the tire impression right away from looking at the pictures?
Yes.
What was that?
It was a 5-rib tire.
With regards to sort of the final level of detail, could you tell anything right away?
Just the tread elements that were in the impression.
And by tread elements, what are you referring to?
Tread blocks, tread design.
The overall tread design in the photographs, could you tell it was complicated or simple?
It appeared to be complicated.
Did you take note of the front tires of the Nissan that day?
I did.
What did you note with regards to the front tires of the Nissan that day?
They were inconsistent in tread design to the particular question impression.
Why were they inconsistent with regards to the photographs?
They were of a different design.
And in what manner were they a different design?
They were completely different design within the tread blocks.
Do you recall specifically with regards to those tires how they were different?
Yes.
How were they different?
Well, for one, the middle rib of the tire had no tread design on it.
What do you mean it had no tread design on it at all?
No design on,
What do you mean it had no tread design?
it was flat.
How many of the ribs were flat in the impression?
One.
And with regards to the photographs, could you tell whether or not the tire that had left the photographs had a flat impression in the middle of it?
It did not.
What did that allow you to conclude immediately?
That it was excluded as a source of the impression.
What about the rear tires of that vehicle?
It had the same general tread design, similar tread design.
What kind of a level of comparison were you able to make with the tires still on the car at that point?
It appeared to be general tread design from the impression.
What did you do to get to sort of a better able to analyze whether or not those two rear tires were consistent with the impression that you were looking at?
I had to take known test impressions.
How did you do that?
In the bay at Lakeville, I took two pieces of what's referred to as chartboard. It's essentially dense cardboard material. It's a section about 8 feet long. The average rolling circumference of a passenger car is 6 to 8 feet. That's why we use the 8-foot sections. When you get into larger heavy-duty trucks or tractor-trailers, obviously the circumference is much more, and we have to add additional pieces of chartboard down. What that chartboard does is it provides a nice smooth surface to record those test impressions on. So in the event that there's any type of imperfection in the floor and the cement, it will bleed through onto the impression.
And what is the actual impression going on to? In other words,
Transparency,
okay, and how long is the transparency?
8 feet,
Why is it that length?
because it's the average rolling circumference of a passenger car.
So you're trying to capture
6 to 8 feet.
You're trying to capture the whole sort of roll around of a tire?
That's correct.
Did you do both rear tires at the same time?
No.
Why is that?
It's difficult. You need more manpower to push the car over the ink board and onto the transparency.
Why don't you just take the tire off the car at that point?
Because you wouldn't be recording the contact pitch or essentially the footprint of the tire.
What's the difference? I don't understand. Why does not leaving it on the car make it so you can't record the footprint pitch?
Well, if you had the tire off the car, it wouldn't be under a load. So if you were to ink that tire, you'd only have a short impression because the tire is somewhat rounded. So when the tire is on the vehicle and under a load, it tends to expand where it contacts the road surface.
And why is that significant? Why is it important that you have the sort of wider impression?
Because it was the way in which the question impression was made.
Did you tell that from the actual question impression?
No, I assumed the tire was on the car.
After you had the ink impression of one tire, did you do both the back tires?
I did.
And why did you do both of the back tires?
They both had general design features in it that were consistent with the question impression.
Now, at that point, can you look at the actual tread design and look at the actual question impression and draw any conclusions at that point?
No, other than its general tread design.
Okay. So what did you do next?
I took the right rear tire, or the passenger rear tire, off the car. and
Why did you
gave-
choose that particular tire?
It was just a tire that I chose to take that day.
Why not take both?
Well, we only had one spare tire, so I couldn't put it up on blocks inside the Lakeville Crime Lab because they need to use that.
And where did you go at that point?
I gave the tire to Lieutenant Bennett, where he logged it in as evidence.
And at some point, did that tire make its way to you at Sudbury?
It did.
How much time passed before you saw the tire again?
Several weeks.
In that interim time, did you do any work on this case?
No.
With regards to this particular tire right here, sir, marked Z for identification, do you recognize this tire?
I do.
And what is this tire?
It is the rear passenger tire off the Nissan Altima.
How do you know it's the same tire?
It has my initials, the case number, and the item number on it.
Who put these white lines on it?
I did.
I move to admit this to evidence at this time, Judge. No objection. When the tire got to you, what did you do with it? Sorry, it's going to be marked. Oh, I'm sorry, that was marked. When the tire got to you, what did you do with it, sir?
I began the comparison process.
What does that entail?
I take the known test impressions, which are two-dimensional impression. We take the one-to-one question impression, take that transparency and superimpose it over the photograph. That known test impression is then slid across. You're trying to find class characteristics or something that's in agreement to that particular questioned tire impression.
Were the photographs that you received, were they in one-to-one size already?
No,
What did you do in order to get them to the one-to-one size?
they were calibrated.
How was that done?
Essentially, at the time, we had 4A, which is our archiving software. They have a tool on there where you take a selected measurement on the ruler that's in the photograph and record that measurement, and it automatically calibrates the image to
Okay.
a one-to-one.
So-
So you're comparing apples to apples.
And what's the second of those apples, sir? So you're comparing the photograph to what?
The test impression.
And the test impression is the inked Mylar sheet?
Yes, it's a transparency.
So how do you go about doing that?
Place it on top of the photograph, and it is then slid down the photograph, and what you're doing is trying to look for those class characteristics that are in agreement with both the known test impression and the question impression.
What kind of characteristics at that level are you looking for?
The grooves and sipes
Okay?
and general tread design.
With regards to the two tires on the back of the Nissan, were those two tires from the same batch at the manufacturer?
They were from the same, they had the same mold number on them.
And with regards to the grooves and sipes on the tire, did the two tires on the back of the Nissan have the same grooves and sipes?
Yes,
Okay. So at this level, are you essentially comparing both tires, because they have the same grooves and sipes, and that's what you're comparing, are you comparing both tires to the known impression at this point?
yes.
Okay. And what did you find?
I found that the rear passenger tire test impression was in agreement with class characteristics within a particular section to the question impression.
When you refer to a particular section, why is that important?
Because the noise treatment sequence becomes more complex over the surface area of the tire.
So the noise treatment sequence is the fact that the little ribs and grooves are different sizes over the course of the tire?
Correct.
So you're comparing the Mylar sheet to the location on the tire that you find the different sizes.
Correct.
On this particular tire, did that pattern repeat itself?
Not in this particular section.
Okay. With regards to that particular section, were you able to line up the Mylar with regards to this particular tire?
I was.
And were you able to line up the Mylar with regards to the test impression, the impression on the ground?
I was.
And how did you go about doing that?
Again, by sliding the two-dimensional impression over the question impression.
And did you make notes as you did that?
I did.
And what were the things that you were noting?
I was noting the grooves and sipes,
And what did that allow you to conclude?
that it corresponded in physical size and design.
And what does that mean? Physical size and design of the tire itself, of any tire, or what was the particular conclusion?
Well, at that point, it's that tire could have made that impression at this point, or any other tire of the same physical size and design.
At this time, Your Honor, could we take a break, or could we break for the day?
May, it's
Thank you.
minutes before 4, we'll stop at this time, resume tomorrow morning. Just keep your mind suspended, don't discuss the case among yourselves or with anyone else. Please continue to avoid anything that it could be about this case or Mr. Hernandez in a newspaper, radio, television, or magazine, or any social media, Facebook, Twitter, or any other social media or anywhere else. Don't talk to anyone about the case or communicate in any way by emailing or otherwise communicating. And if anyone starts to talk to you about the case or communicate with you about this case or your jury service or Mr. Hernandez, please end it immediately. And again, don't do any research about the case or anything you think could be relevant to the case or Mr. Hernandez. Have a good day. We'll see you tomorrow. Again, tomorrow is going to be a half day. Thank you.
All persons having anything further to do before the Honorable, the Justice E. Susan Gosh of the Superior Court, now sitting at Fall River, within and for the Commonwealth, depart and give your attendance here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., to which time and place the sitting of this court is now adjourned. God save the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Court is now adjourned.